I call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Would everyone please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I want to welcome everyone who's here this evening and everyone who might be listening later on at home. Remind everybody very quickly of our agenda for this evening. Very short, the consent agenda consisting of the minutes from the May 12th meeting and a presentation and discussion on the comprehensive plan draft. That being said, we'll move to the consent agenda. Remind everyone again that we are only being recorded, so if you will please raise your hand to be acknowledged so that I can state your name so we'll know who's speaking on the recording. On the consent agenda, do I have any discussion and or motions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Trozen.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for this evening.
I have a motion. Mr. Graham.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes have been approved. And we'll move on to presentation on the comprehensive plan draft. Mr. Allen and Mr. Hawley are going to tag team us on this one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. We're pleased and proud to present to you tonight the draft comprehensive plan. Been several months, technically over a year already, we've been working on this with our steering committee, meeting almost every month. Took a little bit of a break last summer, but they've been meeting almost every month. A number of your colleagues here have been a part of that. Appreciate everybody who's been able to attend and assist. We've had several public meetings as well. We'll get into a little bit more of that as we get into the concept of what we call specific plans. I'll get things kicked off here as we start walking through this presentation, and then I'll turn it over to Jim to kind of talk more specifically, no pun intended, about the specific plans later on in the presentation. So we shouldn't take more than 20 to 30 minutes here of your time to kind of walk through things. Hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to read through it. It is quite long, as you saw, but the idea is to have it function in kind of two pieces. That there's kind of that front piece that's a little bit shorter, more that narrative style, more graphic style, and then there are the appendices, which are really kind of the add-ons, but a lot of the practitioner type detail in the back end. So it's kind of all in one document at the moment, but we'll kind of serve it up, so to speak, in kind of two pieces as we actually implement it after adoption here shortly. So with that, I do want to mention that City Council is looking forward to seeing a similar presentation here at their meeting on June 16th. And we sent out an email late this afternoon from Jim through Karen asking folks in the steering committee to kind of one last chance to take a look at things. We'll do the same for you. Get us comments back by June 13th. And then, again, that is a Friday, so just a little over 2 weeks. So if this isn't your only chance to get all your comments in, and we aren't necessarily going to go page by page here tonight. Otherwise, it'd be much more than 30 minutes, but we do want to kind of hit the key areas and get kind of your initial impressions and comments there. But after that, again, go to City Council June 16th for presentation, and then come back to you for that more formal adoption. Right now, we are looking at the June 23rd meeting. So that's kind of the time frame we're looking at. There's no magic, reason for that date other than just kind of fits into our timeline here. Concurrently with this, we are already working on the Unified Development Code, the UDC update, meeting with individual departments, going through it internally again. We've gone through it several times, as you can imagine, as planning staff, looking at kind of gaps and broken pieces and and just where we can make improvements and update it for the 21st century, since it was last updated in 1996. So that will come back before you too at some point later this summer or early fall, depending on how quickly we can get things kind of ironed out. But our consultant, Gould Evans, is working in the background on that as we speak as well. It will need to go to the Development Advisory Commission, DAC, before it comes here, so they'll make a recommendation to you, and then you then would make a recommendation to the City Council. So a lot of, that'll be kind of more of the page-by-page minutia kind of approach. But as issues and ideas come up, certainly let us know as you look at the UDC, if there are certain things that you've kind of been keeping notes over the years and months. As to things you think need improvement, certainly let us know as we go forward as well. So it's kind of a quick introduction here. This is kind of a framework for the presentation here, real briefly. If you were a part of the steering committee, this is going to look somewhat similar, because it's mimicking what Chris Brewster, our project manager with Gould Evans, presented a number of weeks ago. But this is kind of the structure of the plan, starting with kind of a fast facts, again, more that graphical presentation of what normally would be possibly boring demographic information, financial data, things of that sort. Themes, kind of setting the stage for what are the big ideas that we want to talk about and present to the community. Vision, steering committee spent a lot of time in that to kind of piece together what the vision, what we value here in Blue Springs, and a lot of that then was kind of bounced around at various public meetings as well. So that's where we got a lot of the input that you'll see in the plan from these public meetings. Frameworks, and that again talks about a way to put these ideas into more of a structured concept. And again, hopefully you've seen all this in the draft plan as you had a chance to look at it. The appendices, again, that's kind of the separate piece, back end piece, looking at more the citywide, kind of 30,000 foot level policy maps, specific plans, getting more of that neighborhood level, area level, and then all the technical pieces that go with that as well. And so kind of turn that over to Jim when we get to that point. A little faded to see there, but this is kind of how we've structured and when I say we, I mean steering committee, Gould Evans staff. I mean, this is kind of obviously a large group effort, but we've put together the maps, kind of this more stylized version rather than just kind of the head-on, kind of static type approach. When great detail was not needed. When there are more details needed, obviously it's more that aerial view rather than this kind of more bird's eye view. So the idea behind the plan, and I'm again stealing thoughts from Chris Brewster, but is that we're looking to make this plan more about places and not just land uses. So it's not just a future land use plan like we've been used to utilizing. It's more of a how do we create those quality places and within the community. As it says here, it's more of a planning system rather than just kind of a structured static snapshot. And two key words are incremental and strategic. Again, looking at implementing pieces of this, aiming for different targets and goals in a very kind of milestone manner, and being strategic about it. So, which can also be meaning realistic, not just wishing for the moon and hope it just shows up. And obviously, all in all, this is kind of a different way to think about Blue Springs, at least in terms of how a comprehensive plan works. So if you look at the first, several pages of the comp plan draft, you see a lot of these fast facts, different kind of catchy graphics and such to be a little bit more engaging and kind of straightforward. Folks can kind of zip through. rather than just kind of the standard tables and pie charts and such. So these are the different areas that Gould Evans kind of put their efforts into presenting kind of your standard comprehensive plan, kind of frontispiece with this, but in a little bit more interesting manner. And the idea is to more or less tell a story. What is the, kind of where have we been in the last, 10 plus years since our last comprehensive plan rewrite? And where are we headed as a community in relation to our neighbors, the metro as a whole, and the nation as a whole? These are the themes, concept being big ideas, kind of what are those wishing for the moon type things. But this is kind of the tent structure, and then we'll talk about all the things underneath the tent there. The link. This is the local Jim. Do you know it? Do you remember it? Does anybody remember what the link stands for? We'll get to that. All right. Neighborhoods and gathering places. Great place to grow business. Looking at the economic side of things. Downtown, again, a lot of work that's been going on within the last 10 years, starting with the Downtown Master Plan, moved to Downtown Alive, and then the Main Street program as well. So emphasizing the value of what downtown has done for the community, again, in that incremental and strategic approach as well. And then looking at the old corridors. Traditional way of doing some of these comprehensive plans are doing like these corridor plans, corridor master plans. And we're looking at that, but again, doing it more kind of piece by piece, where the successes have been within these corridors and what can we do to, as it says here, breathe new life into the old ones. These are the four main pieces of the vision that then set the rest of the plan in motion. Real simple, we kind of boil it down over the months from these big kind of grandiose concepts, a lot of text and information behind them. But again, a lot of this is what came out of that public engagement process throughout most of last year. Again, places, looking at the idea of quality places, a great place to live, become a home for generations, kind of the cradle to grave approach, that being the first of the four in the quadrants here. City image, inspiring people to explore Blue Springs, and it started with Councilman Carter mentioning that he did a Google search for Blue Springs, and the first thing you see in that are maps. No icon, no what is Blue Springs, and people just don't have a picture in their mind as to what that could be. So emphasizing what Blue Springs really is and building that image. So the plus to that is, if it's just a map, we kind of have a good place to start. It's not an old town landfill that we're trying to overcome as an image. It's just not much of anything. So we kind of have an opportunity here to build what that image can be. Connections, again, it's more than just your roads, but the overall network. How do we connect neighborhoods? We looked at barriers to these connections, physical and otherwise, and again, giving more choices to folks for transportation options in particular to connect all these different neighborhoods. And then investments, kind of more of that strategic concept, looking at economic enrichment and again, emphasizing the value of economic growth in the community in a more specific way than we have done in previous comprehensive plans. So the idea is to look at more than just the standard, goals, objectives, and those types of statements, but to be more kind of lay out a vision, place things within these different areas, connect them, and then make it usable for folks on that next level, which is that neighborhood level. So with that, I will drag Jim up here while I try to get into the draft that we can put that up on the screen for you.
And thanks to Ben, LINK is Local Integrated Natural Connections. And I think that really the more important part of that is actually when we were talking about the plan, and this came from the public meetings, was the definition of what makes Blue Springs unique from other communities within the metropolitan area. And any of you who went to those public meetings will remember that it was a real struggle at first to come up with that unique feature that Blue Springs has, that is a true asset that other communities don't have. But the one thing that sort of came out of that was that we have a lot of natural resources either adjacent to Blue Springs or in Blue Springs, and that because of the way they're situated within the city, there's opportunities to connect all of those, and with that then create some of those places that were talked about earlier.
Before I let Jim take off here with the, I was talking about those different levels or scales, as we'll talk about. A lot of what we wanted to emphasize too was this graphic nature. Again, it may have seemed subtle, maybe it wasn't that impactful, and that's some of the feedback we'd like to know as well. We didn't want to push it and make it seem gimmicky or hokey, but we did want to kind of start this kind of iconography and tie it throughout the rest of the plan so that folks know that, okay, these are kind of our four main areas of our vision, and how are these different pieces of the comprehensive plan goals and targets, how are they, addressing these different areas. So that's why you'll see some of these different icons then, it's kind of sub-icons within each of these different areas. Hopefully it's not too cluttered. We kind of messed around with it a little bit, but kind of let Gould Evans kind of run the show on that side of it. But we did have some input. But again, if colors are weird, if icons just don't make sense, or maybe you want more of it, let us know. Again, that's kind of the 21st century comp plan. Like we're saying, it's not just pie charts and tables. It's more this kind of graphic interaction.
So Scott spoke of the framework and how we are looking at this, and it starts really with those ideas at the very high, what we've always called the 20,000, or I've heard 50,000, but at the very high level.
I say 30.
Scott says 30.
All right.
30 it is. And obviously when you're looking at that kind of a level, you can't apply a places type of concept, particularly within the framework that's been set. So we had to then look at the city and say, how do we break this down now and be able to come down to that 10,000 or 5,000 foot level and really start to look at these areas from the standpoint of actually implementing some of those frameworks that were provided in there. And let's see if we can hit the next slide. So there you can see we have the citywide policy map that has a very, very, very general land uses, and we did this specifically because of not wanting to see the comprehensive plan go through changes with each zoning change in the city. It's a much broader look at the city, and it's not intended to try to define land uses. Again, we're not as interested in land uses per se, and particularly at this 30,000 foot level. And then you can sort of see to the side, there are three more specific plans that are provided here. Those were the three that were completed, and we chose, we just divided the city into roughly 7 neighborhoods, and of those, through the comprehensive plan process, we looked at 3 of those 7, and one of them was a north area up near Burr Oaks. One of them was a central area that covered Highway 40 and more or less the west side of Highway 7 down through to Moreland School Road. And then the last one really was the, for ease of description, the Chapman Farms area. It did extend beyond that, but it was primarily the Chapman Farms area. From a transportation standpoint, we obviously are going to look at the transportation policy maps. This really just defines where our main thoroughfares are, our arterials, our collectors are primarily the ones located and noted on this particular plan. And there's been a lot of discussion about how each of those street types should look. And what we've settled on through the plan process is to go back and look at what is the policy of the city. And the policy of the city is livable streets. And that can mean different things in different areas, and much of that is depending upon the place that that street either goes through or abuts. So this map, though, really primarily just helps us to define roughly where our main corridors are. Natural resources, if you'll remember, those of you on the steering committee, Chris talked about the natural resource inventory plan that Mark has done, and most of the information from this natural resources plan that's provided here came from Mark. And the idea is to look at those natural resources and see where your beneficial resources are, and to try as much as possible to preserve those for both the region and the city itself. And now we get into more of the specific plans, and this particular plan that he's shown here shows you the areas that we defined. It looks as though I missed one area, and I think it was that north area. Above Pink Hill Road, we have 8 areas. The focus has really been on the lower 7, but we do have 8. The community, within the specific plans and to talk about the community character plan and the land use development plan, this is where we start getting, this is where we start really focusing on within the area, within that specific plan area that we're looking at, is there an overall character that we need to be looking at and pulling that character out, and then trying through what that character is to develop that land use and development plan. So this is really where we start getting to the land use, more of the land use element of the plan. One of the things that we found from feedback in our public meetings was, and not unexpected I might add, was when you start getting into land use and an actual land use plan, the tendency for property owners is to assume that because there is noted a commercial node here, that if that weren't there, well, maybe that doesn't fit in very well there with what was anticipated by the neighborhood. One of the things that is new about this plan and that we've tried to stress is that this plan is about places. So if we come up, for instance, with if you see on a land use plan at this scale, a commercial node, let's say, I'm just using this as an example, not saying that this would certainly be one of the cases, but if we come up with a commercial node like this, we're not trying to imply through this map that commercial node has to be in that location. It's more the idea of this may be an opportunity for this kind of place, but the market's going to drive some of that. And if the market says that's not the location for that place, then we just kind of go back to that plan and say, well, we know we need that place, so let's keep that open and figure out where that goes as the market comes to us and says, hey, I'd like to try something like this here, then we can adjust that. And because it's a specific plan, we don't really have to change the overall land use, comprehensive land use map for that, because remember, that was the more general at a higher level. So this is the north area, and I'll go through these relatively quick. This then was the central area. You can get an idea of kind of where we went with the central area. One of the things in particular with the central area was, and this was an area that we did hear, well, who's going to really do this commercial node right here off of 40 Highway close to Ward Park and in this neighborhood? Well, maybe nobody. If that place doesn't develop in that way, that's okay. But the idea is that within this neighborhood, we need to find where those places are, and we need to foster those kinds of developments to create those gathering places. That's the idea. This particular area also had great connections, of course, to Fleming Park, and we were looking at how we can strengthen those connections. Won't go too far into that. And this then is the south area. It was called South 1, I guess. And this was the Chapman Farms area, and again, we ran into some of the same things, but one of the unique things that I wanted to mention about the south area that we didn't really hear in other areas, probably because they're more developed, was they didn't want to see the same patterns in the south area that were happening north of them, meaning that they didn't want to see the Highway 7 corridor be lined with the commercial strips and retail, and the neighborhoods then extending back from that. So that was really the perfect setup to start talking about places and how could we avoid doing that. So at any rate, I won't go too much more into that. If you have questions, we can talk a little bit more about it later.
Thanks, the last one.
I think that is the last one. And with that, I think maybe the best place to go from here really would be to open this up to some questions and any comments that you might have.
Would anybody like to make some comments, please? Yes, Mr.
I
McDonald.
had a couple comments and a couple questions. The land use map that you showed at first,
Hold on, just a minute. I'm going to get.
well, I don't need to see it.
Okay.
It's not labeled in the stuff you gave that we were given. In other words,
In the
you don't know what it is.
Okay, that's a good.
It doesn't have the same label on it as you have on the slide.
Which one are we talking about?
The land use map.
The
The overall
future,
one?
the main map, the future land use,
So if you go into the appendix, I think is where you're going to find the main land use map.
the first one.
Yeah, let me. Oh, just a second here. Oh, I see. Not that. No, okay.
Not that one.
I lost my scrolling ability.
Well, you don't need to go to it. I didn't have a question about it.
But that's good to
in
know, and
particular.
we'll make sure that
But
that
it
gets
does need to
labeled.
be labeled, because my big question was, where is the future land use map? Because that one wasn't labeled as that. The other thing is, the way I understand it, the only specific plans that have been developed are for 3 of the sections in the city. Are they going to develop them for the rest of the city?
Yes.
Or are we going to do it?
We are going
We
to do
are.
that. As we go through that process, we may have them help us with that through.
When
but it's
will
through
they
a
be
different-
developed before the comprehensive plan goes into effect? I guess what I'm concerned about is, I'm a developer and I come into town and I want, my piece of property is located someplace where there isn't a specific plan yet. How do I know what I can do there?
You're right. It'll be more of this general nature at that point. So it's
If I
really
read
just those-
the general nature and definitions, I think as a developer, I can make a good argument. I could do almost anything there because there isn't any real comprehensive plan.
I know what you're saying, and I think Jim was saying that as well, that the idea is it is more flexible in what would be allowed there than what we have now, because what we have now is parcel specific, almost as though it's a zoning map and not just a future land use concept. And yes, this isn't different. The idea here is that this is, as we're saying, places, it's generalities and not a parcel level type approach. What we've had in the past is, for example, down south are areas where you have these nodes and we have developers carving out pieces of an oval because they think it's a meets and bounds legal survey description when it's really just a concept. So the idea here is to get away from comprehensive plan land use map amendments to actually, look at more the policy level type of approach and bring that forward to the Planning Commission through, PUDs and PROs. So there won't be comprehensive plan map amendments, piecemealing little chunks here and there. It's going to be emphasizing if there are any amendments, it's to zoning, or it's through a PRO, or it's through a PUD. And the idea is to approach this from more of a generalized nature. That is this, for example, is this neighborhood center down south here? Is that the approach that a developer is coming forward with? If it's all a bunch of duplexes, maybe not. But again, still not holding them fast to that if the Planning Commission and City Council thinks that's an appropriate use in the general scheme of things. But the idea is you have your guidance here of a neighborhood center in that area. Why would it be changing from that? And that's really the question, is that this sets up that dialogue with the developer to say, why do you think, Mr. Developer or Mrs. Developer or Ms. Developer, why are duplexes more preferred in this area? Well, I did a demographic analysis and talked to the school district, and here's how it fits, and we're looking at more of a neighborhood commercial area down the road, but in a different phase, in a different project. It starts that dialogue with staff, with Planning Commission, with the council, to look at these things in a more holistic nature, not just, well, I see you have a multi-use transition district in half of my property, but the other half is this. So can I change the whole thing to multifamily instead? And then you're carving out little pieces with no real big picture vision. So the idea is to try to focus on a big picture vision and not just parcel level carve-outs, so to speak.
Are we going to change our zoning, the way we define zoning, to the same terminology that's used in this? Or?
Have we gotten to that?
We haven't really gotten to that. No, we haven't gotten to that. But I'm not,
The
from
idea,
what we've discussed, I would say that the terminology between the comprehensive plan and zoning will not necessarily be the same, and nor would they be, because we're looking at things from a different viewpoint in the comprehensive plan than zoning is ever intended to look at.
and the idea though is still like we have now in the current comprehensive plan to match up some of these place types, as we're calling them here, with zoning options. But like you're saying, Bob, I think the specific plan is going to be more detailed. But the idea is to have that dialogue with the neighborhood, with property owners, to discuss how this, this area, for example, should be refined. We've provided one for the Burr Oak Woods area, but it still adheres to these general concepts, business hub at Pink Hill and 7, neighborhood center, as Jim was pointing out earlier, at between Duncan and I-70 on 7. So those concepts of place types are still there, but it goes back to that idea of that's your framework and general development types, but you don't have any specificity beyond that. But like we're saying, it's really up to the developer to come forward with something. How does that fit into a neighborhood center? Have that dialogue with staff, Planning Commission, and council, and then see where it needs to go from there. The idea is that saying that the city has adopted this, saying at Amesbury Parkway or Jellison and Pink Hill Road, we want to see a neighborhood center. If something else should develop there, why? It's really just to set up that question of why, and let's have that discussion. And not make it a archaic process of, okay, it doesn't fit that, let's never ask the question why, let's just go through a process of modifying the comp plan, going through rezoning and carving pieces out with no real, larger scale discussion or vision. So it is still kind of that, again, higher level, I'll say, feel-good type approach, but it is. I mean, it's, we talk about dreams and visions and such in here, and we talk about goals and targets. We're not going to hit every target, but let's at least aim in that way, and this is kind of how we're aiming those.
And my understanding, too, is that the zoning map is still going to be the zoning map. I mean, that's going to be what can and can't be done.
Right.
So we're not, just because the comprehensive map doesn't specifically say two-family dwellings or something like that, there's still zoning underlying that does say two-family or multifamily.
No,
or-
and very good point. And that harkens back to some of the discussion the steering committee had, is that what does a neighborhood center encompass? And it gets at Bob's point is, here are the more traditional land use types that can fall under that. Here are the zoning categories that we have that fall under that. So it's still in there in kind of a tabular format, I think in the appendix even.
I think it is as well.
But it's not front and center like it has been. It's not front and center saying, here is what's matching to zoning, and it's really just a zoning appendix, which is the comp plan, rather than actually a guiding vision for the city.
So then if somebody wants to come in and make a zoning change, then they just argue that zoning change based on the ideals in the
Yes.
comp plan, not by a specific piece of map.
Correct. I mean, we can use, and as we're getting more and more specific with these specific plans, there's more of an opportunity to guide them in a better direction, and have a more specific dialogue versus what we show here. So yeah, in the meantime, to go back to Bob's question, in this northeast quadrant, this is what we have until we get a neighborhood plan. So if someone comes forward, Lake Ridge Village, that's business hub, that area around the lake there, what's previously called Lake Ridge Village. Until we have a more specific plan, this is all we have to guide that area.
But and the other thing that this comprehensive plan really tried to address, and it was set forth sort of in the very beginning, was the idea that the comprehensive plan ought not to be what, for lack of a better way to say it, slows down economic development, but also can anticipate market changes, which is what our existing comprehensive plan absolutely cannot do, evidently, without changes. So if someone were to come in here and, I guess, is there a way to point to that? Yeah. If someone were to come in and look at the note at Pink Hill and Adams Dairy Parkway and put forward their argument that, a commercial center is not only is it not economically feasible, but it isn't even really the best location for it for X, Y, Z, A, B, C reasons. With this plan and with zoning, we're able to address that without them going through a change to our plan, because we can look at this and say, oh, okay, we missed that one, that's okay. We need to find out where that goes, because it's still a necessary thing, but maybe it's not what we originally envisioned. We called this a neighborhood, a neighborhood center. Maybe the gathering place in that neighborhood really isn't a commercial center at all. Maybe it's a park that becomes the gathering center, and then maybe we look and see, okay, how are our connections to that park going based on now what they're proposing with this new development? I guess without going into further detail, I hope that sort of explains the idea that the way that this plan is set up for places also allows it to be to allow the market to respond a little easier than it had before.
And the intent, as Jim was saying, kind of from the early stages, from the beginning, was to make the comp plan, if it were to be modified, updated, revised, something that the Planning Commission and staff does, not push it on a developer, make him go through a process just to go through a process in order to make something match zoning. And that by them doing that, they're changing the community's vision and not, appointed officials and such, and, the representatives of the city. It's a developer on a project-by-project basis changing the vision. So, and as Jim's saying, it may evolve to, where something may change in here, but that's something that is incumbent upon us as a group to look at, and the neighbors, maybe even as a group, as we get through that specific plans process, to discuss and decide. So,
Mr. Trozen.
Just a follow-up in regards to the discussion. So one of our decisions based on zoning is to ensure that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan for the city. Is there enough muster in this plan that if we turn down a developer because it's inconsistent with the ideals in the plan, it will be upheld?
Maybe we ought to leave that one to Bob.
Well, that's my fear. I mean, that and the fact that it, you say it gives you flexibility. I think it gives the developer as much flexibility as it gives the city to argue that, hey, wait a minute, that this fits in here, because all of the definitions in the high level one include almost everything.
it will be I want to say trial and error, but there'll be some of that, I think. It is so radically different than what we've been doing. And this is the table I was referring to before, and the idea of talking, through with the steering committee was this idea of, kind of these ratios, these percentages of different types of uses that would fit under these different places. So these are kind of the areas we have these places or patterns, those main, dots and colors I was just showing in the future land use map. Then we have general land use categories. Kind of what are those more things you might see coming forward in a general sense in the specific plan, and then you have all those different specific uses. So these are the things that then can match up with the zoning, but exactly, a gathering place is more, and here's explanation of that, and primarily it's going to be open space, institutional, but you don't see in there, neighborhood retail, you don't see office, light industrial. But yes, as Bob's saying, once you get to neighborhood center business hub, it's going to be a little bit more open. And that's why it really is going to be more of those extreme examples, I think. Like I was pointing out, we've got a neighborhood center and somebody just wants to build duplexes. That seems a little bit more obvious. But if somebody wants to do duplexes, a convenience store, and a strip retail, it's a little fuzzier, and that's where it then goes back to the decision makers to decide whether that is appropriate for that area in the grand scheme of what we presented and what we've adopted in terms of that vision.
And the other thing that is a little different about the comprehensive plan is that the plan is set up on those ideals that Scott had mentioned earlier, the frameworks, you can go back to those. Those are where a developer makes his argument that he's meeting those, and those are also where the city makes their arguments if you are looking to for some reason to deny something, because if somebody's trying to change something in a particular area, you don't necessarily go to the map and say, look, this is what the map says. You go to the plan. The plan says, hey, within this, these are the frameworks, these are the policies, these are the reasons why we don't think this fits here. Bob, I'm really looking to you. I mean, those are where it comes from. We relied on the map, I know, in the past, but I don't think you have to rely on the map. The map is one part of the plan, right?
Well, in Missouri, you don't have to follow the comprehensive plan, so it
Right.
doesn't really matter. So in some senses, this is all an exercise in,
We feel good, Bob.
I'm not
Makes
sure
us feel
why.
good.
Thanks, Bob.
whenever, well, all land use decisions of the city are construed against the city. I mean, if you're, people have the right to use their land however they want to, unless the city has specifically said you can't, and what they say, how they say you can or you can't is construed against the city. The developer's got the upper hand, so to speak, as far as when things are vague and things like that. And I just think I fear that it's getting a little too much like we're saying, we can just decide what you can put there and what you can't put there. It doesn't matter what the map says. But I mean, only time will tell. I'm not saying, you know, I like a lot of the things about it. You did ask about the icons. I thought the icons were really nice when I was reading the first part, but then they disappeared when I got to the part that really talks about planning.
No, I agree. I've mentioned that before to the consultant. So yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and each of those 4 different areas, as we were talking about, you know, places, city image, connections, and investment, all have their different kind of color-coded icons, and you can see here, you know, orange bar across the top is places. Organizing elements, talking about those are the different pieces that go into what makes a good place within the community. And yes, it is a little bit more, I mean, comp plans, if you look at the current comp plan, all the narrative that goes with it, not just the map, as we're saying, there's a lot of, we would like to do this, you know, we recommend doing this, things of that sort. And we went through back in 2009, you know, just 5 years ago, we went through kind of a, you know, let's cross off things that we have and haven't done. And surprisingly, we did actually meet a number of those goals already at that point. And it wasn't just because of individual developments that they met the goal. And that's, you know, what we're talking about here. You know, we keep emphasizing what a developer may be doing or may not be doing, or what we can or cannot approve, or but it really goes back to what does the community want to look like based on the concept of places, based on the concept of image, connections, and such, and how our developments as they come forward meeting those, but also, as you know, we've had several discussions with Ben in Public Works, you know, how our capital improvements projects, you know, meeting these types of things. That's something that we always look at as well. As you just saw, you know, not long ago, a couple meetings ago, the capital improvements program. That has to be, per the charter, based upon, you know, kind of compared against the comprehensive plan. And so it's not just, you know, individual private developers that be using this, but, you know, neighborhoods as they evolve, as they look at, you know, these gathering places, as we're talking about here, as we look at distinct destinations within the city. And a lot of work has been going on, has gone on with these individual groups through public meetings to identify, generally speaking, where these different neighborhood centers, gathering places, so on and so forth, already exist or may best exist. So this isn't just, for example, this map showing where they could happen. This is identifying where a lot of them already are, and how can we emphasize that, promote that, and can make those connections. So it's more of a mixture of, I guess, what you call, you know, existing conditions with, you know, kind of these future desires. You know, we kind of segregated those before. We had existing conditions survey and demographics and so on and so forth. It was just this academic exercise. Well, here it's kind of mixing those together and seeing what we already have and strengthening some of those. You know, a lot of it, I guess the first half of this whole thing, just jump back real quick, of the whole process was just identifying where all these things already existed. You know, what are the assets of the community? You know, the parks and the lakes and, you know, schools and churches and all these things that you see here with the little heart icon. You know, these are places that are already valued and identified within the city. So it's just, there's a lot of identifying this, maybe, you know, as a developer looking through their eyes, they can see, oh, okay, this isn't just necessarily what they want to have there, it's what is already existing. And how can my development complement that or expand upon that, or maybe run counter to that in different areas that might be appropriate. So yes, in the end, it is really just a guiding document, but hopefully a little bit more, I guess, emphasis on those values as we're talking about, emphasis on what's already existing, and again, enhancing what we've already done over the last several years. Again, going back to some of those icons, to jump away from that too much, but you can see at the top there kind of what these different goals are tending to connect with. They can kind of change, I think they can change some of the shading and the bolding here. It's a little hard to distinguish some of those. But the idea is then you can go back, okay, what is being addressed through these different goals? And then targets instead of these objectives and details of we will have this, this, and this. But more specifically, we want to look at, for example, enhancing, again, looking at existing or building gathering places so that most homes are within a 5 to 10 minute walk of at least one gathering place. So again, just, how does a development, for example, come forward, as Jim's saying, not just the map, but the plan, how does that address this? And we would discuss kind of a scoring system at one point. If they meet 8 of 10, is that enough to go forward with everybody's approval? If they meet only 3 of 10, is that enough to turn it down? And I think it became a little bit too black and white when that really wasn't the intent. Well, what if it's really excellent 3 of 10? What if the 8 of 10 are okay, but the 2 that they're missing are critical? And so that's where you saw that table in terms of ratios of uses. But the idea is to look at, staff, we would put forward, a staff report for new development. We'd look at these different targets, and we would give you that information to say, okay, when you look at these new targets, they're building something that this gathering place is identified by the neighborhood. They're within 10-minute walk of it. Check. And it wouldn't, we wouldn't necessarily score them on it, but we at least would tell you kind of where they're fitting in these different areas.
One of the things that always seemed to me redundant in our process was when we would have a zoning change come before us and we just automatically do a comprehensive map amendment at the same time. And you knew if one of them passed, the other was going to pass. There wasn't there was just too much of a 1-to-1 ratio of exactly how those things had to match up. And I really like this have that more subjective character to it, so that we want somebody to come in and we want to argue the ideas that are going forward here, not, well, we got to change this map so that it matches up
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And the idea is not just the first one in is therefore going to be just automatically accepted because, well, they're the first one to have an idea. Well, does it match up with this, or is it a bad idea? And have that dialogue and in a more cogent way through this plan, rather than exactly like you're saying, we just pull out a map like we've been doing and just checking things off. So there's still going to be kind of that checking off approach a little bit, but more in a more,
in more of a narrative rather than
yeah, exactly.
just
Thank you. Exactly.
as
Right, exactly. You're looking at more of this in that vision type approach. And again, every developer has a vision beyond just dollar signs. How are they enhancing what's within the community? How are they maintaining a long level of service for their property? How are they highest and best use type approach? And this allows us to have more of a discussion based on a better framework for that than, well, you don't match the map or you do match the map. And, well, you kind of meet some of these nebulous goals, goals and objectives, but, there's really no distinction between them. So it is different. Again, not to downplay or belittle the current comp plan, but it's showing its age, and it's kind of worn out a lot of its usefulness, I think, in this day and age. And we saw a lot of that. It's exactly right. We saw a lot of how it's evolved into the point of being just another thing to match up with zoning. And if zoning was recommended for, not to be approved, and the comp plan was not approved, and the city council would see it, and they would overturn that and approve the rezoning, then we had that disconnect that, well, all of a sudden there's an unapproved comprehensive plan change kind of floating out there too. So anyway, hopefully this is going to get, not hopefully, it'll get away from a lot of that.
Mr. McDonald?
I mentioned it earlier, but, and this is one of the things that bothers me, is not having the specific plans for everything. And
Bothers me too. I wish we could have them all done.
the plan as it exists right now, I think Seth calls that one of the targets is for the city to add one specified section each year. There are 3 already done. There are 8 total. So that if we make the target, we're going to be adding, for 5 years, we're going to be adding to the thing to get all the specified zones. And it's those areas that
Yeah.
really concern me, where we don't have very much specificity.
No, that's a good point. And we had the same concerns, absolutely. And we were wondering, I think that's very conservative. I think we can easily meet that. I think we can have it, we're looking at trying to do 2, I think at least 2 a year, if not more, depending on how quickly these can be turned around. Again, this was a larger scale consultant-led effort to get 3 done. But now we've been given that toolbox and we can go and put those together rather quickly, I believe.
Are we going to do them the same way with community input and stuff
Absolutely.
like that?
Yeah, it can't be done without that. Again, the emphasis on, stakeholders in terms of community leadership within that area, and then also, key property owners. What we did, I think we did that, Karen can confirm this, with all of them. I think we sent out postcards to everybody
Right.
within
We did.
each of those areas to invite them to public meetings, so.
We did. We sent postcards to every resident and commercial property owner in the area, and then there was a percentage that received a quote special invite from the mayor in order to try to encourage people to come, so to speak.
Well, I like the targets and goals and all that, and I think it's always nice to have something to look at that keeps you trying to go in a direction that might be the best way to go. So I'm not trying to downplay it. I'm just discussing issues.
I don't know, absolutely. And I appreciate that, Bob. And I think we've had a lot of the same conversation over the last year, steering committee as well. Even just, talking about that table, checking off things here. I started to get a little carried away again, and all of a sudden we're looking at scoring sheets again. And that's really not what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it a lot more user-friendly and not prescriptive. And I think that's what became of the comp plan, because it got so meshed and tied with the zoning that it became a prescriptive type thing, just like the zoning. And it's easy to do that because that's an easy way to, to mark progress, so to speak, is that you're actually making changes and you're checking things off a list. This is going to be different to operate because it's looking at targets and, with ranges. It's looking at ratios of land uses. So it's going to take a lot more complex level of dialogue and thinking as we move forward with each of these. And not just on our part or your part, but on those property owners and developers too. So, but again, trying to present it in as easy a way as possible. We've gone through several versions of this. I think the steering committee can attest, changed colors of fonts and sizes of icons and things like that. They've done a lot of great work to help make it as easily accessible and readable. And going back to, I know George put together his APA conference write-up, and that'll be in the plan notes here this week. But one of the discussions we had at one of the comprehensive plan sessions was, if you weren't a planner or you weren't on the planning commission, would you want to read it and would you be able to read it? And that's kind of our goal here. It's tough. We need to, maybe I need to have my middle schooler read it and see if she has any ability or interest in reading it. But we'll see where we go from there.
Are there any other questions or comments that anybody would like to make?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I have a question. Is this content being used in any community very close to ours that you can draw out of?
Was it Maryland Heights, or what was the one you were thinking of?
Maryland Heights was the code. I don't think that went around.
What were you thinking of?
This is where it would be really nice to have Chris Brewster here because Chris could
Yeah.
could tell us which communities have done similar types of comprehensive plans. And also, he could say, and it was in such and such a state, and their, you know, their state statutes deal with differently than maybe ours. But
Illinois was something that you reviewed even?
well, yeah, Munch, I don't know if I can pronounce it.
Yeah, I'm not-
MUNC something. Yeah,
There are a
I just
few.
have to go back and look.
Yeah, there are a few that have come up in Missouri, Illinois, Kansas that we reviewed.
Maybe, in the next couple of days,
Sure.
you can let everyone know that, because that's a question that I'm going to be looking at and asking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very
that-
good.
That's absolutely something we can
Because
do.
I have some concerns about the subjectivity of this.
Sure.
You know, we've been, I know, extremely rigid, which I'm not in favor of, but I also think that sometimes if someone comes into our community, we want them to have some guidelines also, without saying, well, wherever you want to be,
Right, right.
whatever. So I'd like to see how it is working in another community.
No, that's a very good point. I appreciate
That's a
that.
good point, and we can put some information on that together.
And I know we've been looking, sorry, we're conferring here, we've been looking more similar format with UDCs, with codes, zoning codes in other communities that look very much like this. More graphical, more in terms of that format, but yeah, in terms of the actual function and structure, we'll definitely look into it. And Chris will be here for the adoption meeting, so we'll have another kind of final presentation.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the pictures than I am about the content.
Sure, absolutely. And, but again, yeah, we'll talk with Chris and get some more information, and get that out to everybody. That's a good point. But yeah, he will be here at again, planning on the June 23rd meeting. He'll be here to give a kind of final presentation and Q&A and with the public hearing.
Does that final presentation, does that involve a public hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's next.
All right. Mr. Trozen, did you have another comment?
Please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I enjoyed reading the Do You Know Blue Springs section. I found the information very interesting and intriguing. And I noticed about the aging population and also the household size. But when I went further in the document, I didn't see a lot of language as far as targeting, developers or someone who come in and establish those type of housing that would basically retain that aging group and those empty nesters. Or is Blue Springs a community where, people buy their home, they pay off their home, and they just stay in their home until they're ready to move to either another community or another state? I know it's not a very pointed question, is it?
No, I know exactly what we're talking about. We've been attending, again, even at the APA National Conference, number of sessions and discussions on kind of aging in place is a concept, livability with seniors in mind. So that's a good point. I think a lot of that has become a little bit more new information at the tail end here, but I think we do need to include that somewhere in here as a target.
And it really, with the concepts within the plan, it really is included, because it's included in a different way. It's included through the sort of policies and the goals of the plan itself. But the market's going to drive how much senior housing that Blue Springs needs. That part will be market driven, and it's just really a residential use. But what seniors really need is mobility. They need, and through that mobility, they need access to services of all sorts. And those are the kinds of policies that we talk about through connections. Do they have those options? And if you look at Blue Springs right now, those options are really limited. If you don't drive, your options for having services that you can attain by yourself, pretty limited. So at any rate, I think a lot of the policies actually, and I think the way that this plan is set up, really speaks to that pretty directly, which is that we need to increase those types of connectivities that allow people mobility within their own community in multiple ways beyond just cars.
I think, again, a lot of that is in here, like Jim's saying, we can certainly be maybe more pointed in how it relates back to some of that too. I think we tried to trim it down and be more all-inclusive, but I think that's a good point. So that's why we have some of these call-out boxes here. And we can certainly use some of those comments in these call-out boxes more so than just in the targets. The targets are going to be more, like we're saying, seniors want walkability. Well, so do pretty much everybody. I mean, there's some things that are pretty universal, but specifically, what can we call out here as referencing back to those within these different call-out boxes? So,
Well,
That's
especially
the place
given
to
the
put it.
trend
I
information
think
that you
that's good.
have.
yes, no, you're right. To
and-
point
and-
back to what the trends are saying exactly. And yeah, there's been a lot of that trying to how we integrate a lot of these pieces. That's where a lot of the icons came up, just to kind of tie back to some of those bigger thoughts. How does this goal about integrating housing choices into neighborhoods and corridors? Here it meets two of these, previously identified elements here. Neighborhoods and corridor reinvestment, and what do those mean, for example? But that's as best the integration we had at this point. But yeah, tie it back to the original information at the front. It's a good point.
Good, definitely.
Thank
I
you.
agree.
Are there any other comments, questions?
Okay, I got one more.
Go ahead.
I'll be quiet. The more traditional comprehensive plans usually have an implementation section, or, what targets are you going to focus on first or in the next few years? And there's a lot of great information on here, but how do you start prioritizing which direction you're heading as far as trying to move forward with implementing those targets?
Jim?
That's a good question. No, seriously, that's a really good question, and it's one I'm not sure is fully answered yet, because you're right, a traditional comprehensive plan will have an implementation plan, and it will have typically your short-term implementations, your long-term implementations, and your long-term implementations. When we originally set this up, we looked at trying to identify what things we thought could become short-term implementations, but when I read through the plan, I had trouble putting my finger on what those were again, and the same is true with any long-term implementation. So I think that's a really good question and really good feedback to give to the consultant.
You're right. We did have that conversation several times. I'm looking at one here, for example, talking about downtown. You create 750 residential units. We had a lot of discussion about that. Is that, how arbitrary is that number? Is that a good threshold number? That does point back to some of those demographic trends at the front. It's not abundantly obvious that that's the case here. But again, locate 500 jobs in downtown. We looked at timeframes and such, and it seemed almost more arbitrary. And it's one of those things where, again, through the CIP and such, maybe we can identify some of these targets, through, just annual planning efforts. And it almost, flip side, forces us to look at this more regularly than we have been. That we can go back and see, well, where are we in terms of residential units downtown this year? Well, we only had 25. Okay, well, look like this 750 maybe isn't realistic. Should we scale it down? Where are we going to be in 5 years? But yeah, I think we'll go back to some of our original notes and just see if there's more of a time frame we can place to some of this.
I do. I think that's a really good comment, and I think that really, that kind of that idea of setting your implementation goals, I do think that's helpful. I think that's one of the ways communities can start to achieve the vision that they've set out for. And I know, again, at another point, we had talked about whether or not we wanted to use some kind of iconography to identify which were short and which were long-term goals. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. But I think that's a really good comment, and one that we need to send back to the consultant and say, you know what, we're still really unclear on how we, just exactly what you said, how do we prioritize implementation of some of these things?
Yeah, and there was some talk, earlier on, the first part of the plan, talking about, next 10 years, next 15 to 20 years, but it's certainly more general nature, and some of these are, I guess, as a whole, more that what can we do in the next 10 years, but clearly some are more, within the next year. Some are more within the next 20 years. And no, that's a very good point. Just how can we identify that a bit more
Mr.
closely?
McDonald, did you want to say something else?
I just wanted to say that in going through the plan, it seemed to me that an awful lot of the targets and an awful lot of the goals were really things that would be city-funded, creating, streets and open spaces and things like that. So I guess how fast the plan moves ahead may depend as much upon the city itself as it does on developer-driven development.
Okay, and again, that's why I settled on this one, because it's less so emphasis on the city, but in terms of locating 500 jobs in downtown, that's multiple different partners would be involved in that. And again, even just the idea of these gathering places, not necessarily just creating gathering places, but we have a lot of them already. I don't want to keep harping back on that, but I think a lot of the really good value of this process so far has been identifying what we already have. It's a lot of what we did back in 2009. Where have we been successful? And identifying that and then emphasizing that for folks that come in as developers. Every household should be within a 5-minute bike ride, 10-minute walk to parks and trail system. That's not just the city, for example. It is in part, the city may be building more sidewalks, expanding certain options, street network, but it's looking at, new residential development. How are you connecting your new development to these recreational amenities?
And the other thing, now I'm going to put on sort of a champion hat for the plan. The other thing that the plan does, and this was really set forth by Kevin Klinkenberg, who was a sub-consultant, but the other thing it does is it actually allows us a way to start to analyze when we do capital improvements, what is our return on investment? Because right now, we don't look a whole lot at return on investment. We just say, we're going to do this. This is where we're going with this. And we have sound reasons. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say we don't. We have sound reasons for doing it. But I don't think that we've looked really at what the return on the investment really truly is to the city. And I think that's an important thing to do, and I think the plan sets us up to be able to do that, and particularly for some of the smaller CIP projects that may have much larger return than we ever realized.
Are there any additional comments? Okay, I think we're finally through it.
No, it's very good. Very good discussion. And
Very good
comments.
discussion.
we expect lengthy emails from everybody else.
That you all have your homework
Say.
assignments.
But
Okay.
no, very good input. I appreciate all the feedback, and we'll certainly go back and respond to some of those comments that in more detail. Again, Chris apologizes he could not be here tonight. Again, we're kind of an off night, Wednesday night, so he will be here for the adoption, though. So if there are any extraneous questions between now and then, again, we said the 13th, I think is a pretty good date. Hopefully it gives everybody a good 2 weeks. I know it's right at the beginning of summer, but it gives you 2 weeks to go through it one more time. Maybe a lot of discussion here brought up some more questions that you may have had. Again, just questions, get us questions that we could answer, get us comments, get us corrections. But in the next 2 weeks, so we can then have a little bit clearer picture when we go to the city council, kind of refining things, but certainly for that 23rd.
And Chris
final
will
adoption.
also be here for that
Yes.
council meeting, so.
Thank you.
If that's a notion that any commissioner would like to attend that particular council meeting, again, that's June 16th. Chris will be here, and he will be putting some of this together, and so hopefully we will have answered or responded to the comments that were mentioned tonight. But if other things come up, that's another opportunity to stand up and say, hey,
Yep. But in closing,
Looking
as
for those.
Bob, alluded to here, I think we're really going to see the value of it when we start using it. Where there are some gaps, some holes, and where there are a lot of strong points, we can envision what it, how it may operate. We've done that for months, the steering committee and amongst ourselves. But you can build a car, but until you drive it, you're not quite sure exactly how it's going to turn out. So that's kind of where we're at.
And really, our planning was, we knew Bob was kind of getting close to retirement, and we thought that the new city attorney really might not be able to catch up with all of what we were doing here. I want to, no, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
I don't even know when I'm leaving yet.
We're glad. We're glad.
Absolutely.
We enjoy you, Bob.
So no, yeah, appreciate everybody's input. Again, a lot of you have been part of the community for a number of years, so you've seen how things have changed. Hopefully, we've captured that a lot. Again, we've captured that strongly here in the comp plan. Hopefully, we've addressed a lot of weaknesses from the current comp plan, but also still bolstered the things that we're working. Again, it's a full rewrite, but that's just how things have to happen, I think, every 10 years. We're doing a fairly full rewrite of the UDC. We're going to keep section numbers, chapter numbers, zoning categories. It's not going to be a full redo of the entire city, but it is going to be a pretty thorough cleansing of the UDC. So it won't be as radical a change for the UDC. Maybe format-wise, may look more like this, more graphical, but content, it's going to hopefully flow and be familiar to you.
Great comments.
Okay.
Really appreciate the comments. They were great comments. So.
I think we'll move on to other business. Our next meeting is June 9th. We do have agenda for that evening.
Yes, we have
Parkway Villas.
Parkway Villas. Thank you, Yes. Sorry, Parkway Villas, which is the northwest corner of Moreland School Road and Amsbury Parkway. The developer has come back with a new vision and design, and we'll look forward to presenting it to you on the 9th. So they took that to heart, went back and redrew things, and coming back here for another look. And then we'll also hopefully be going through appointments at that point in terms of representatives on their boards and commissions, electing chairman, vice chair, things like that. The mayor is looking to complete some more of the appointments or reappointments at next week's council meeting. So everything should be buttoned up for us to move forward with that same process here at the 9th.
Look forward to it.
All right.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to announce or comment on before we adjourn this evening? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Trozen. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.